Bhai Vir Singh was born December 5th, 1872 in Amritsar. He was born into a very illustrious family of 6 scholars. So his grandfather on his mother's side was Yami Hazara Singh, a very famous 6 scholar of the late 19th century. And on his father's side also, it was a family of 6 scholars. So Faisal was born into steeped in Gurbani and into the old Sikh tradition and into Punjabi. He also learned in his youth, he learned Persian, he learned Sanskrit, he learned Urdu, also very important languages for understanding Sikh tradition. So he was a multilingual person, what we call, in the modern day, we call a polyglot. He was a master of many different languages, starting with Gurbani, but all the different neighboring languages that it's important to understand Gurbani in its full context. One interesting aspect of his life that influenced the direction of his life, when he attended a school that was called a church mission school in Amritsar. So this was a school run by Christian missionaries, English medium school. That's very important. So he was steeped in this traditional Sikh learning, but he went to high school in English medium school. He read all of English literature that you would read in an English medium school. He read in Western philosophy. If you read his works, by Saab's works, he references all the Western philosophers, Kant and Hegel and all the famous names. He's totally knowledgeable about the Western tradition, steeped in the Sikh tradition. When he graduates from high school, he makes a decision, a fateful decision, that he's going to spend the rest of his life dedicated to writing, editing, and publishing among the Sikh tradition. 1892, he's just 20 years old, he establishes a Wazir-e-Hind printing press in Amritsar. It's still there, still running. In the decade of the 1890s, this is all in his 20s. He establishes a printing press, he establishes Khalsa Samachar newspaper, Punjabi newspaper, still being published, next year's 125th anniversary of that. He establishes Khalsa Tract Society. There was using his printing press, they published small pamphlets and tracts on contemporary issues having to do with Sikhi. They published more than 400 tracts in their career. Before he's age 30, he wrote the first novel in Punjabi, Sundri, published in 1898. So he's done all these things, but most of us wouldn't achieve in a whole lifetime. He's not even 30 years old yet at this time. After that, he dedicated himself, he published 3 more novels in Punjabi. He dedicated himself to collecting the stories of the Sikh Gurus in what we call the Chamatkars, the stories of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's life and Guru Gobind Singh Ji's life. He also wrote extensive commentaries on all Gurbani. Particularly notable is Japji Sahib Sahib, which several of you have probably read or delved into. A masterful work understanding, unfolding the meaning of Japji Sahib. So he was uniquely placed as a person in between all of these worlds, between the world of the traditional Sikh learning, the new world of the scientific knowledge that was coming from the West, through the colonial enterprise, through English language, and so on and so forth. He was also coming at the dawn of what we call the age of modernity. Exactly during that time, 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, his childhood, all these technological changes were happening. There was the rise of railroads, the steamship, the printing press, the telegraph. All of a sudden, people can move across continents in a matter of days, which would have taken weeks and months before. They can send messages instantly through telegraph. Printing press, you can reach mass media, you can reach hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people all of a sudden. So these things are affecting everyone, not just Sikh community. All of the world, Europe, India, Africa, South America, everywhere in the world, the whole world is changing, and we're moving into this thing that now we call modernity. So Faisal was witnessing all of these different changes and the challenges that are coming to Sikhi. And he had this prophetic vision of all these technological changes are happening. We need to be able to preserve the deep feeling of Sikhi, the true feeling of Sikhi, because otherwise it's going to be lost in this technological change. Especially transportation is moving people all around the world, right? Where people are not only growing up in a local community, a local Sikh Sangat, for instance, is moving now to East Asia, to China, to Malaysia, to Burma, to Kenya, right? All of us here today, somebody in our family moved somewhere at some time. Some of us were born here, some of us came here, but everyone here, someone in their family has moved at some point. Some of us have roots in Punjab, some from Delhi, some from Kashmir, someone from Burma and Kenya, and so on and so forth. But all of us have that in common, that we're part of a global Sikh Sangha involved in movement. So when we're involved in these kinds of movements, we live in different cultural contexts all the time, right? So we have to be able to make sure we understand and have some roots in Sikh feeling. This is what Bhai Sahib's mission was throughout his life, to make sure that that deep Sikh learning we can be rooted in that Sikhi wherever we are in the world. And he produced voluminous works. He's probably the most prolific writer in Punjabi and Sikhi, and he's one of the deepest writers also. So he had an achievement that almost cannot be matched. So I'm going to give, so I've spoken about his novels. He established a newspaper, he wrote Janamsakis, he wrote commentaries. But today I want to talk a little bit about his poetry. So around 1910s, 1920s, he's around getting to 40 years old, 40, 50 years old. He really turned his attention to writing poetry, devotional poetry. And most of the rest of his life he spent in writing devotional poetry. So I want to give some examples of that and talk about why it's so important for us to engage with that poetry. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to read one verse from one of his very famous poems called Kamdi Kalai. This was published in 1933. So he was around 60 years old at that time. So this is the first verse of that poem. So he says, Supne vich tusi mile asanu, asan ta the bakri pai, nira noor tusi hath na hai, sadi kamdi rahi kalai. So, for the benefit of those who are learning Punjabi, I'll give a simple English translation. So, Supne vich tusi mile asanu, I met you in a dream. Asan ta the bakri pai, I tried to embrace you in my arms. Nira nur tusi hath na hai, but your radiant light escaped my hands. Sadi kamdi rahi kalai, my wrists remain trembling. So I want to talk. So this is an example of expression of what we call in Sikh tradition we call birha. So birha means separation, and the feeling of longing that comes from separation. Separation from the divine, I should say. Separation from the divine. And that longing feeling that we feel that we want to unite with the divine. And we see this all throughout the divine, right? Birha, this feeling of birha. All of Sikh practice, Simran, Seva, Sangat is to get closer, to unite with the divine, unite with Vaheguru. So I want to speak a little bit about just these two words in the poem, Kamdi Kalai. This is the name of the poem. It's also the name of the collection that poem comes from. It's also called Kamdi Kalai. So Kalai, for those of you who are unfamiliar, it just means wrist. It's just a part of the body. Kamdi, kamana, means to shake or tremble like this. So this is essentially the gesture he's talking about. This gesture, Kamdi Kalai. This is, he says, this is the essential attitude of the Sikh. This is the way the Sikh should be oriented towards the world. Kamdi Kalai. And what is this meaning, the deeper meaning of this? It's a gesture of humility. It's a gesture of vulnerability. It's a gesture of openness. And it's a gesture of wonder. What we call in Sikh, we call nisma. It's the wonder of the universe. It's openness to that wonder. We can have many different types of gestures, right? This is a gesture of openness. This is a gesture of aggression, right? Of closeness, right? And this is the gesture of Kamdi Kalai, is undoing that closedness and opening it like this. This is a much more difficult gesture. This is the easy one. This is closing yourself up and giving into fear. There are some times where you have to adopt this posture, but we don't want to stay in this posture. This is the essential posture of the Sikh. Kamdi Kalai. This is what this poem means. It's openness to Islam. So this is an example, just in these two words, it's a simple phrase, but there's all these different, deeper layers of meaning, of the attitude towards the sick, towards the world. Right? This is the power of poetry. Right? It's something you can't say in just a newspaper or pamphlet. Just in these two words, there's all this depth of meaning, and we can keep expanding on the meaning. Right? There's this phrase, I was thinking when I was coming here, when sometimes we're asked about Sikhism, what is Sikhism? We meet somebody in the store, or when we're traveling or something, they say, oh, you're a Sikh? I've heard about Sikhs, can you tell me more about your religion, and so on and so forth. And the definition we often see many different places is Sikhism is a monotheistic religion founded in 1469 in Punjab, India. Some variation of that sentence. We see it everywhere. We see it in brochures, pamphlets, on websites, and things like that. Sikhism is a monotheistic religion founded in 1469. Those are facts to some extent, but that doesn't tell you anything about the spirit of the Sikh. The spirit of Sikhi is what's important. Those facts aren't going to tell you how to live in the world, what value, how you place value in the world, how you open yourself to the wonder of creation. It has nothing to do with Nam, it has nothing to do with Virna, Vismat, and so on and so forth. So that's a definition that's provided by non-Sikhs to describe the Sikhs, but that's not our definition. It's the Sikhs on there. We have to, this is what Bhai Vir Singh is writing his devotional poetry, to make sure we preserve this feeling of that depth of feeling and understanding and wonder. So Bhai Vir Singh was writing, he writes about his experience of Gurbani. But of course, Gurbani is the source. He's helping us to engage with Gurbani. I want to give one example from Gurbani that reinforces this kind of sentiment that Bhai Vir Singh is trying to express. So this is a Bani we recite every evening in Sohela. Rab Nasri Mala Kalam Godim Matal Rab Chandip Bune Karaka Mandal Janak Murti. Right? This is Guru Nanak Sahib is saying this is the universe is like a plate, a dish with the sun and the moon lying upon it. And the stars are like pearls lying upon the dish. Again, this is the power of poetry. You can't say this in prose. Right? In one line, Guru Nanak Sahib has expanded our mind to the entirety of the entire universe. This is what the Sikh Gurus wanted their Sikhs to have. The widest and deepest possible consciousness. So not just this arti, that's it for us, but this arti, that's all of creation, all of the universe. That's what the Sikh Gurus wanted their Sikhs to place their minds. And this happens this is the power of Gurbani, right? In just one line we can go and travel the entire universe. Later, Guru Sahib says, one of the most famous lines, the simplest line, Kaisi Aarti Kare. This is probably the purest expression of Vismat that has ever been uttered. What wonder is this Aarti, Kaisi Aarti Kare? This is Vismat. This is the sense of wonder, a permanent sense of wonder that the Sikh, this is the attitude of the Sikh. You can imagine when Guru Sahib uttered that line, Kaisi Aarti Kare, he made it making this gesture. This is a natural, when you say Kaisi Aarti Kare, you wonder at his eyes may have been looking at the firmament of the universe, and this is a natural gesture for it. This is the gesture of openness and wonder. This is what Bhai Vir Singh is talking about. This is Kamabikala. It's the gesture of openness and wonder. So he's taking the inspiration from the divine, and he's written a poem about his own personal experience, about the divine. I saw you in a dream, and I was trying to reach you. That's the feeling of weird I was experiencing, of separation and longing. So, to close this, we can, as Rajamji said, we can keep speaking about the depth of his understanding, keeps going and going. I just want to give just a small glimpse of what Bhai Vir Singh is trying to do. So, again, to come back to his time and place, right? He published this poem, Kamabikala, in 1933. It's almost a century ago, almost 100 years ago, 90 years ago. It will be a century in a little while. And he saw even then the importance of maintaining this depth of feeling and the inner mystical aspect of Sikhi, and how important it was to be able to preserve that. Most of our intellectuals of that period who we still read, Bhai Vir Singh, of course, is one of them. The next generation after Bhai Vir Singh came Karan Singh Nava, Mahan Ghosh, Professor Teja Singh, Shabdar, Professor Sahab Singh, Bhakjot Singh, and so on and so forth. All of those figures I just named, they all published their works by the 1930s. And in the last 100 years, the last century, we've hardly had a single person who has engaged with this level of Gurmani again. So there have been intellectuals, there have been scholars, especially in the post-partition period in Patiala, Punjab University of Patiala, we have Dr. Ganga Singh, Fauja Singh, Taran Singh, Professor Karban Singh, and so on. So there have been some people. Those are all historians. It's very important work. We're thankful that they did that work from the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s. But coming to the experience of Gurmani, we have to go back already 100 years. So we have to ask ourselves, as what has happened to Sikh intellectualism? That we're not producing that work anymore. Because arguably, Bhai Vir Singh, he saw what was the situation that was happening. He transitioned us from the pre-modern period into the modern period to make sure that feeling is preserved for the future. But now we're in probably an even worse crisis than it was in the 1890s. Then it was the printing press and the railroad. Now we're dealing with all kinds of things everybody knows about, right? Social media, phones, and so on and so forth. The distance from that feeling of Kamdi Kalai is getting even more than it was in Bhai Singh's time. So it's time for us to start. We have to go back to Bhai Sahib's words, Professor Sahib Singh, Bhai Vir Singh, and so on, and take inspiration from them and look to our challenges today and do that again to produce another body of work so that the next generations, the young people, can preserve that feeling for the future. So just one last thing for the young people here who may want to, or anyone else who wants to get into Sahib's works. I would highly recommend his novel Sundari. When I was a teenager, I wanted to get better Punjabi. I was okay at it, but I wanted to improve. So we had one or two shelves of Punjabi books. So I looked there. I thought maybe it's a good idea. I'll read a book in Punjabi and try to. So I didn't know who Bhai Vir Singh was. I didn't know this was the first novel in Punjabi. It was honestly the thinnest book I had on the shelf of the Punjabi book. So I picked that and I said, well, I'll start with that. And thankfully it would turn out to be a very important book. And I sat down, and I'm saying this for the benefit of young persons who are maybe thinking, how can we get into reading these works? And I sat down, I understood 50% of it. I wrote down all the words I didn't know, looked them up in the dictionary. It was the old days, we didn't have online anything, so I just wrote down all the vocabulary, and it helped me a lot. And I started understanding who is Bhai Vir Singh and what is the significance of this novel. The other works I would, you can start with any of his works of poetry. He has about 12 books of poetry. This is Kamdi Kalai, from which I read that verse. This is a wonderful book of poetry. It's all about the Sikh gurus and the experience of Sikhi, the experience of Gurmani from his perspective. There are a few books I would recommend. I think every Sikh should read them at some point in their lifetime. And there's Bhai Vir Singh's Siri Guru Nanak Chamatkar and Siri Kalgidar Chamatkar. So there are those life stories of Janam Sapita of Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Guru Gobind Singh Ji, respectively. They're very accessible. They're written in small chapters. You can read a little bit each day, or every other day. And that, again, gives you much greater depth into not only the facts that Guru Sahib traveled to this town and this year, but the spirit. What were the gurus, Sikh gurus? What was their mission? What were they trying to convey in the deeper sense, in the spirit of the Sikh type of sense? Those are very important. And then, of course, his commentaries are wonderful. Bhai Gurdas, he's done full commentary on all the bars, and Bhai Gurdas, and Japji Sahib Sikhi is wonderful. So I know a lot of the young people are memorizing Gurmani, and that was wonderful to see. you know, as you memorize each body, it's nice to look at commentary, Professor Sampson, Bhai Vir Singh, one line at a time, slowly and slowly and slowly, and you start understanding the deeper meaning. And that's how you get to that level of depth. That's what Bhai Vir Singh left all these works for that purpose, not for himself. So the Sikh Sangha will be able to maintain that depth of feeling into the future, and any situation, anywhere in the world, any level of technology, anything, they'll maintain that depth, the true depth of Sikhi. That's what the Sikh Gurus are giving us. We'll take off, Varmish Khalsa,